or 969-2652. Open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comforts of your own home. They take your favorite local dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Hofady, this is Kayla from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years. This show is also brought to you by Security Title, making sure you actually own the property you think you just bought.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And we all know that. We say it every day. I say it every day. It's a good way to start a really good radio program. In fact, the very top-rated FM radio talk show, afternoon radio talk show in the entire Western Pacific, right here, Tall Tales, 93.3. And the program starts every day with a respectful reading of the Second Amendment, and will more than likely go on to other parts of the United States Constitution, including the Bill of Rights. That's the kind of thing that gets talked about here on Tall Tales. So let's start out Tall Tales today with a reference to Zemi Ikotni. So, as you well know, I start out the program with Zemi Ikotni, taking a look at the editorial pages of both of our newspapers, trying to find something of local interest and almost never finding it in the Daily News, always finding it in the Post. I take a look at the two editorials, check them for errors, and will oftentimes award the coveted blue star to the better of the two, which more often than not is the Post. The Post having won the Blue Star 200 times to only 57 for the Daily News. And the 57 goes back a ways to when the Daily News used to run its own editorials almost every day instead of running stuff from USA Today or the Gannett News Service. Today is no exception. There's a piece here by James S. Robbins, who is a USA Today contributor. He is a member of the USA Today Board of Contributors. And it's actually a pretty good editorial. He says, agitators overshow Floyd demonstrators. And he goes into the civil rights movement, demonstrations, looting, and riots, and makes the point that the whole looting and riot thing probably is counterproductive to what the demonstrators are agitating for. So the only local connection we have is that we had a group of people out on Tuesday at the ITC intersection waving signs, Black Lives Matter, and similar type signs, which I thought was rather unusual. I spent a fair amount of time commenting on their approach as well as what's going on in the United States. And they promise that they'll be back tomorrow at the Kipua Loop in Naganya. So I think my question today, given what's happened this week, is are those people who are going to be out there tomorrow, are they demonstrating in favor of the demonstrators in the mainland or in favor of the rioters and looters? And does it matter? So we'll see how that goes. Now, on the Post, for many of the extended no disconnection policy helps workers still waiting for unemployment benefits. For many of the more than 22,000 Guam workers who are seeking unemployment benefits, the money they've been waiting for might take another 2 or 3 weeks to arrive in mailboxes or electronic deposits. This is their second phase of waiting after the application process finally opened over the weekend. And for many of our displaced workers, it must have been dreadful to think they could get disconnected from power and water before they could make payments to the power and water authorities. Thankfully, GPA and GWA decided to extend the suspension on disconnections for non-payment for 1 month to June 30. This decision will help the displaced workers' families get through to the finish line when they can finally get their unemployment benefits. There have been times when it seemed our utility agencies helped their own first, as shown by their $1 million spending on double pay and prior bonuses, but this time they have shown sensitivity to the hardship that Guam's private sector workers continue to endure. I don't know that I want the utilities to be sensitive to hardships. I want them to provide power and water. And I don't want them disobeying or not complying with the open government law. And as far as the double pay is concerned, from what I've read and what I've been able to find out, Power and Water may have complied with the rule 8.406 as it was written. Maybe, maybe not. It's a terrible rule and it's a terrible idea. But if it was the law, then how do you fault a government agency for following the law? But as far as going back again to sensitivity to the hardship that Guam's private sectors continue to endure, you know, the sensitivity thing sounds great on paper, but when people don't pay their bills, the ones that do pay their bills ultimately pick up the slack for the ones that don't. So it's nice, I suppose, to be sensitive, etc. But as per our discussions here on Tall Tales, it's a lot easier to be sensitive with someone else's money than it is with your own. Now, if there is a moratorium on power bills and water bills, and it's finite, with the understanding that when the moratorium is over, everyone is going to have to pay what he owes, that's probably okay, because in a sense, the government is what caused the hardship here by closing everything down. Back to the editorial. GPA also took another move to help Guam's struggling residents recently via the reduction in fuel surcharge now rather than later, so that the cost of power bills would go down, starting with meters read on June 1. And of course, that was because of they adjusted the LEAC because of the precipitous drop in the prices of oil. And the PUC did its job. We also have the Public Utilities Commission to thank for the reduction in the cost of the fuel surcharge. Well, I'm not going to thank them. You know, they are a regulatory body. And once again, a regulatory body regulates in accordance with principles. And as far as the PUC is concerned, the principles are economic. So if the two utilities presented cases, or if the Power Authority presented a case that the price of oil had gone down to the point that the LEAC could be reduced, and they made a compelling case, then the PUC is not doing anybody any favors, which it shouldn't be doing, by reducing the cost of the fuel surcharge. That's why we have a Public Utilities Commission. Here's a quote. Many people are concerned about the health and safety of themselves and their loved ones. They do not also have to worry about the essential utility services being shut off for non-payment, as GPA-GWA has extended the temporary suspension of account disconnections due to non-payment through June 30, said GPA General Manager John Beneventi. We do ask the households of displaced workers to reciprocate the utilities' gesture by making good with their payments once their unemployment benefits arrive. Well, just the whole tone here just doesn't sit well. We want, we did you guys a favor, and now we want you to reciprocate our gesture by making good with your payments. Well, how about this? You owe the money. This is not about being kind and being nice and empathy and things like that. The Power Authority and the Water Authority sell power and water. And to provide power and water is an extremely expensive undertaking. So we run into an unexpected period of hard times here because of the Wuhan virus. Not so much because of the Wuhan virus, but because of what we did in response to the Wuhan virus, which was shut a lot of people out of their jobs. So because a lot of people don't have jobs, the Power and Water Authorities are saying no one has to pay his bill on time. And I pay my bill on time, my two bills on time, not because of any great economic principle, from force of habit more than anything else. But I suppose what I should be doing is not paying. Because if I didn't pay, I wouldn't be disconnected, and I would have the money that I ordinarily pay for power and water. I would have that money at interest, using it for day trades, hitting the game rooms with it, doing something to generate a little income from that money. So, when we fall into this kind of social approach to providing services, it's a mistake. We have to start out with the idea that people owe money for power and water. If the commissioners decide to give them a short-term break because of exigent circumstances, then we don't come back and say, now we gave you a break, now you have to give us a break because you have to pay. I just, the whole feel of that statement by John Beneventi, in my mind, is wrong. He says, we do ask the household of displaced workers to reciprocate the utilities' gesture by making good with their payments once their unemployment benefits arrive. Our utilities need to recoup the cost of providing the entire island with water and power. So at some point, GPA and GWA do need to get paid. And if you don't pay, we'll turn them off. That's the reason people are going to pay, not because of John Beneventi's kind words. Another set of thank yous also needs to be said to our banks and credit unions that offered payment deferrals or forbearance on loans carried by consumers and businesses. In the same token, banks and credit unions also expect their customers to make good on promises to pay later. Being part of a community means carrying our own share of the responsibilities. If we don't pull our weight, we shift that burden onto others to carry. And that's exactly what socialism is all about. So if you have a loan from the bank, I could see good business reasons for the banks not taking a really hard line and defaulting too many loans. I could understand that might not make good business sense. Better to give your customers a grace period rather than go out and look, to foreclose on the ones you got or default the ones you got and have to go out and look for new customers. But this idea of, well, we're going to do you a favor here and not make you pay for utilities now, but please do us a favor and pay when you get your stimulus money. So no blue stars today. Sorry, Post. On to the card. Well, let's see, I guess on to the phone calls. Probably, yeah. How did I guess? I was about to say probably another Joe. Yeah. Well, thanks for helping me get the program started here today, another Joe.
Hey, Uncle Bob. So you were talking about the unemployment checks or benefits. Are you specifically talking about the office that they're establishing under the Guam Department of Labor?
No, I was talking about, not me, it was the editorial, talking about the stimulus money. John Beneventi. John Beneventi said, so when you get your stimulus money, we want you to pay your power and water bill.
Well, is it right that they're putting the office in charge of that under the Guam Department of Labor?
Probably, yeah.
So per
our conversation yesterday, you probably think it should be in the OBGYN ward up at the hospital, right?
I don't know.
Well, remember we had that chat yesterday about whether or not it was labor law?
Well, I'll tell you what. It would probably help out the money that before this whole pandemic, GMH was in need of money, was it? For a while?
Yeah.
I think they're getting money. I don't know. You think they're getting enough money now, or you think they still need more money?
Probably going to need more money.
So the thing is that people have been saying that this is the first time ever on Guam that we've had an office that deals with unemployment benefits, dealing specifically the checks or the stimulus checks, so to speak. And just hearing stuff here and there, like the question asks, why haven't we ever had unemployment here on island before? And there's talk about the Chamber of Commerce, the Guam Chamber of Commerce, had been an opponent of that idea, and something along the lines of, well, probably would have cost $900 million, or I don't know if those numbers sound right to you.
No.
No?
No.
So now that we do have it, the impression is this is just temporary, that they're not going to continue it. Although in the past, whenever they've established a new office or department or organization, it's very rare that the government gets rid of it. Am I wrong there, or has it happened?
Yeah, I think what you're saying, another Joe, is that once the government starts doing something, it's hard to get them to stop, right?
Yes, that sounds what I'm trying to say. Do you think that they will stop making use of this office? Do you think there's a use for this office in the future to provide unemployment benefits, which are funded through usually with the federal, national government on the state level? Is it?
Well, the way unemployment works in the 50 states, it's a cooperative program between the national government and state governments. I'm not totally familiar with all of the mechanisms, but the national government kicks in some money and the states kick in. Well, Actually, there's a tax. An employer has to pay 6% of the first $7,000 that he pays anybody on his payroll. He has to pay into that unemployment fund. So one reason that businessmen don't like it is, hey fellas, here's another tax you can pay, along with withholding tax, Social Security. Now you can also pay into this unemployment fund. And of course, the more employees you have, the more you're paying, and the greater the turnover you have, the more taxes that you're paying. So the way it works in the 50 states is that every one of the states has an unemployment office. So if you don't have a job, you go to the unemployment office and you fill out 3 or 4 reams of paper, and some bureaucrat will look at those and say, well, and I actually did this when I was in law school. The first summer I was in law school, I went to the employment office in Albuquerque, and they said, well, this cement pumping company over here has a job for a laborer. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. So they gave me a phone number and an address, and I think they gave me a piece of paper, and I went over there and applied for the job, and I got the job. So that's one of the things they do. The other thing is that if you lose your job, if a worker loses his job, he goes to the unemployment office and he turns himself in. First thing they do is try to find him another job. And if they can't find him another job, then they put him on unemployment, which means he gets something like half his ordinary pay, which is paid for by that tax that his employer paid, until he can find another job. But there's a limit on it, maybe a year or something like that. But they're always looking for a job for that guy, and if they find a job for him and he doesn't take it, then he comes off unemployment. That's the way it works in the mainland. And I have to tell you, it's like so many other giving away money programs. It has great unfairness. And I'll tell you how it works in the northern parts of the United States. Northern parts of the United States, like where I grew up, people that work in construction companies make really good money, especially the unionized construction companies, bricklayers, carpenters, plumbers, sheet metal workers, etc. But around Thanksgiving, it gets too cold, and the construction business grinds to a halt. And it probably doesn't come back till late March. So all of those construction workers are laid off. Guess what they do? They go down to the unemployment office and say, hey, look, I just got laid off. So for 4 months, they draw unemployment. Even though even if you look at how much they made for the whole year, they made good money. And I did some of that kind of work, some building trades when I was younger. And the construction guys think it's really funny. Yeah, 3 more weeks and we can start drawing armchair money. Kind of reminds you of what we're talking about here, right? Where guys got to stay home and still get paid. So there are lots of reasons to not like unemployment insurance. However, on the other side of it, Joe, once that money from the national government gets into people's pockets here, I can see our 15 senators, good and true, saying, hey, man, this is a good way to pander to the people. Let's do unemployment. We're the only place that doesn't have it. Let's start it. So that's a long answer to a short question, Joe.
Well, that's very, very good information, though. So that would explain why the Guam Chamber of Commerce would be against having this unemployment insurance and the office, the unemployed office.
Well, we do have the employment office, at least in theory. Our unemployment office helps people find jobs. That's a big part of what Department of Labor does. But the business community, it's a general rule, if you're talking about a new tax for the business community, they're not going to like it, no matter how warm it makes somebody else's tummy feel. They're probably not going to like it.
So I think you're against it then.
Got a break coming up, another Joe.
Thanks for your time, come up.
Nice talking to you, another Joe.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
As we emerge from the effects of the global pandemic, Security Title is rethinking how to best serve our customers. With our houses clean and closets reorganized, here's a reminder to take a look at the title to your house and other real estate. Is your trust in order? Is it time to update your wills? Do you have the best interest rate available on your home? As we get back to work, there's no better time to revisit your most valuable asset, your property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Tumon are now open for your dine-in experience. Necessary precautions and safety protocols were assessed in order to maintain a clean and sanitized area for you and your family while dining in. Join Mezcla in Hagåtña and Tumon locations for a true taste of Guam.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so we finished up with Demi Cotney, and let's see what I've got on my card for today. I've got Troy versus Janela, day 16. I've got Tina and her never-ending search for dangerous public health and safety situations, day 11 for Tina. I have Mary Torres versus private property, Judge Sukola versus double pay versus the 21,548, CLTC versus Jack. Now, this is not our Jack, Real Joe Cruz. This is not Jack McDonald's. This is not Jack. This is not the Jack who had his own talk show yesterday.
That's right, yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Remember he had his own talk show?
Yeah, you mean Drive-Through Jack.
Drive-Through Jack, yeah. I've heard of drive-by shootings before, but we have a drive-through talk show host, Jack. Very nicely done, Jack. And I've got Kehlani Rages versus Minneapolis is still on the card. I don't think we'll get to that today. I suspect we'll get back to it on Monday. So as far as Troy versus Janela is concerned, it's been 16 days now since Crystal Paco issued this apology on to get Janela off the hook. Carlo Branches publicly stated he directed Ms. Carrera's action that day, and the lieutenant governor is satisfied that he has taken full responsibility. As the responsible party, the apology was his solely to make. And that's spelled S-O-L-E-L-Y. Although perhaps, given the tone of this announcement, it could have been spelled S-O-U-L-Y. Because the way Carlo expressed it, there was a lot of soul there. Yeah. The apology was solely Carlo's to make. It has been made abundantly clear that this situation will not be repeated. Signed, Crystal Paco, also known as Crystal Paco San Augustine. So even though Crystal Paco San Augustine said that it's abundantly clear this situation will not be repeated, we are standing a Janela watch here on Tall Tales to make sure that she doesn't mute any other microphones or cut off any reporters who are just trying to do their jobs. So it's been 16 days since the Crystal Apologetica. And Janella hasn't done it so far. But we're going to keep watching. And then it's been 11 days since Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes has detected an emergency, a dangerous situation for the public health or safety. How do I know that she hasn't detected any emergency for the public health or safety? Well, she hasn't called the legislature into an emergency session. And she hasn't waived the requirement for public hearings for any bills like she did on May the 20th. So Tina is right there. Talk about a frontline worker. Boy, she's right out there looking for the danger to the public health and safety. And apparently she found it on May 20, called the legislature in for the 21st, waived the public hearing requirement for 4 of the double pay bills, and much to her surprise, the author of one of the bills moved to adjourn the legislature so the bills could come on for a public hearing a week later. Yeah, so much for Tina's ability to detect emergent situations. So it's been 11 days since Tina detected her last emergency. Okay, next I've got demanders versus the Treasury. And this story is about the Commissioner's Council, which is probably about as useless an organization as one could find. Why do we need, when we only have one official here, one public official, whose sole responsibility is at the village level, why do these guys need to sit in this quasi-parliamentary body passing resolutions and giving their executive director outlandish raises? Well, this is GovGuam leaders demand employees' rights to choose a health insurance provider. So that's what the Commissioners' Council did. They demanded the choice for insurance providers. Now, once again, I'm way, way out of step with the thinking here with the Commissioners' Council and with Pito Terlahi and his co-sponsor on this bill. The Government of Guam Insurance Program for Government of Guam workers and employees is a pretty darn good program and pretty affordable. If you were to compare it with what else is available here on the island or even in the 50 states. And there's no constitutional requirement that a government provide any health insurance at all. Notwithstanding our governors telling us health care is a right, not a privilege. So, you know, the whole idea of the government providing health insurance, which is like a $91 million expenditure, is not something, you know, it kind of fits into that same pigeonhole where we've got a lot of people out of work and we've got some government employees carping about double pay. Well, we got a lot of people that don't have any health insurance at all and don't even have a primary care physician, you know, and we got a lot of people that even a cut finger is a financial emergency for them. So here we got government employees demanding the right to choose. Don't give us just one health insurance provider. We demand the right to choose. Yeah, okay. I'd like to say something good about the Commissioners' Council, but even my creative mind is not up to the task. Then I've got Mary Torres versus private property. Where's my Here it is. I got to read this section of the U.S. Constitution here before we start. It says no state, and that means no territory, etc. Wait a minute, that's not the right section. Yeah, no state shall impair, as you were, make anything, pass any bill of attainder, ex post facto law, or law impairing the obligation of contracts. We have a similar provision in our Organic Act. So if the real Joe Cruz and I have a contract, and let's say it's a 20-year contract, and I say I will pay the real Joe Cruz much more than he's worth. Fortunately for him, we have a minimum wage law here. If he is the producer for Tall Tales for the next 20 years, and during that time never uses the word bathroom, and it's all properly signed up, etc., nice looking stationery, and Mary Torres decides, that's so unfair to the real Joe Cruz. Actually, if there's any unfairness, it's probably to me, but that's another story. Mary Torres says, that's so unfair to the real Joe Cruz. So I'm going to introduce a statute that says that anybody who is forbidden from using the word bathroom on the job is not bound to the obligations of his contract. He can... Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. So Mary Torres passes, enacts or introduces a bill that said if the real Joe Cruz has to use the word bathroom, then he can break that contract. He's no longer bound by that contract. Well, that's where the contracts clause in the Constitution comes in. So you can't impair the obligation of a contract with a statute. Well, Mary Torres apparently can, because here's a bill to provide lease protections to victims of abuse moved forward. A bill to provide lease protections for tenants who are victims of family violence, sexual assault, or stalking was moved to the voting file. Here's a quote. I introduced Bill 214 to address some of the challenges that victims of violence face when finding safe housing. And then the article goes on to say the pandemic highlighted the need to ensure access to safe housing for victims of violence. Now that's just something that the reporter added. So the reporter here is editorializing instead of reporting. Where's my blue pencil here? That's the Daily News. Okay, you get an F right there, Daily News.
Get him, Bob.
Yeah. If you could tell the author of this article, if he's so bound that he wants to editorialize, he could come to the editorial page because there's nothing there anyhow. But this is what he said. The pandemic highlighted the need to ensure access to safe housing for victims of domestic violence. And we're back to Mary Torres. For far too many victims, a stay-at-home order meant being confined with the person. Yeah, here we go. Mary is politically correct. For far too many victims, a stay-at-home order meant being confined with the person that was harming them. Senators generally supported the bill, stating it was necessary legislation given the high rates of sexual assault on Guam and the financial challenges that can deter residents from leaving harmful situations. Quote, passage of this bill would send a very clear message to the survivors in our community that we support them, said Senator ragingly. It also sends a very clear message to landlords. It is one more reason, that being a landlord can be pretty hazardous. With documentation from victims to prove instances of violence, the bill will allow victims of violence early termination of rental agreements, protections against eviction and liability due to damage incurred due to violence, lock changes at the landlord's expense if the victim lived with the perpetrator, protections against landlords' discrimination and retaliation for victims' history or situation with violence, protection against disclosure of personal information by landlords. So let's take an example. Let's say John and Mary, right? Let's say John and Mary live in the Real Joe Cruz Arms apartments, and they pay their rent, and they have a 4-year lease. Now, the rent for their apartment, if you wanted to just rent it for a month, would cost you $2,500. If you wanted to rent it for a year, the Real Joe would let you have it for $2,100. But if you wanted to rent it for 4 years, the Real Joe, as a landlord, understands that an empty apartment, costs you a lot of money. So you can't make money with an apartment building unless you've got people renting your apartment. So if he could rent it out for 4 years, he eliminates the risk of not being able to find a tenant, so he can obviously rent that apartment for a lower price than he could if he were renting it for 1 month. So he says, 4-year lease, I'll let you have it for $2,000, right? So John and Mary are in the apartment for about a year, and John and Mary get into a spat. Now, I won't even go into what kind of a spat it is, but Mary goes to the cops. I suppose I'm being sexist when I say that, right? Mary goes to the cops. She rounds up the necessary paperwork. She presents that to the Real Joe Cruz, and the Real Joe Cruz has to say, okay, Mary, I guess you beat me, because if you had only rented this apartment for 1 year, it would have cost you $2,300. So you came out winners on this one, didn't you? And I noticed an awful lot of damage in your apartment. And according to the statute, I can't charge you for that damage either. So I don't know how the damage occurred, but when it comes to domestic violence, it appears that I am a victim of domestic violence now. Isn't that the kind of thing you'd say, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
When you hawked your gold watch and borrowed thousands of dollars from your Nino and Nina to build this apartment building, what involvement with domestic violence did you think you'd have?
None.
None at all.
None at all.
You didn't think that you would all of a sudden become an insurer
No.
against the vicissitudes of domestic violence.
Correct, sir.
Yeah. So Mary Torres has an R behind her name, but boy, if there's ever progressive Democrat legislation, this is certainly it. And this is what socialism is all about. Let's involve the government in people's lives as much as we possibly can. So if you look at, this is 221435. I'll come back to this right after the break.
Bank, we're not going to the bank. Use many of our other delivery platforms like online banking at bankpacific.com, accessing cash at our ATMs, shopping with our debit cards. For businesses, we have secure cash and check drop windows, and we are employing a new smarter mobile app with remote deposit capture in the next few weeks. We're all in this together, and together we will win. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots. Member FDIC.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Tall Tales is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
So here we go, heading down towards that big halftime show. And here's a new 21 GCA 48501 that would become the law if Torres's bill passed. If a tenant to a residential rental agreement or lease agreement notifies the landlord in writing that he or she, wow, Real Joe Cruz, what do you think of that?
Crazy, sir.
Yeah. Doesn't she know how to use the word they?
I don't think so, sir.
Notifies the landlord in writing that he or she is the victim of family violence, criminal sexual conduct, or stalking, as defined in Guam law, and provides to the landlord evidence is defined in Section 48501B, and the tenant seeks to vacate the premises due to fear of imminent danger for self or children because of family violence, criminal sexual conduct, or stalking, then the tenant may terminate the residential rental agreement or lease agreement and vacate the premises without further obligation, except as provided in Section 48501. So my husband was stalking me. I want out of the lease. Now, I'm not even talking about chiseling here, you know. Obviously, the opportunity for chiseling here is great, but just take it on its face. You got to ask yourself, what business does the government have in telling and getting involved between a landlord and tenant because the two tenants can't get along with one another? By the way, I see a real constitutional problem here, Real Joe Cruz. If a tenant to a residential rental agreement or lease agreement notifies a landlord in writing that he or she is the victim of family violence, I guess it's okay. All right. For the purposes of this act, evidence that a tenant is a victim of family violence, criminal sexual conduct, or stalking may be provided to his or her landlord in the form of a police report, a valid restraining order, a statement written within the prior 30 days from a licensed medical or mental health professional. So, if a tenant to a residential agreement terminates the residential agreement and vacates the premises, then the tenant shall be responsible for 1 month's rent following the vacation of the premises, which shall be due and payable to the landlord 90 days after the tenant vacates the premises. If you can find the tenant, of course, you don't know where the tenant lives anymore. Following such payment, the tenant shall be released from any rent payment obligation. What if the tenant doesn't pay? This provision shall not affect a tenant's liability for delinquent unpaid rent or other amounts owed to the landlord. Nothing in this section relieves a tenant other than the tenant who is a victim of family violence from his obligations. A victim under this act shall not be evicted based on an incident or incidents of actual or threatened family violence. So you could have a situation, you know, one of those situations where they're, you know, a Bill and Hillary type situation where one of the parties is throwing lamps and dishes at the other one every night and just making a terrible racket. They can't be evicted for that. Nope. Nothing in this act prohibits a landlord from evicting a tenant for reasons unrelated to family violence. Nothing in this act prohibits a landlord from instituting a forcible entry and detainer action against the tenant who perpetuated the family violence. So you can kick out the violator. You just can't kick out the violatee. Then the next section talks about lock changes. If a person who is restrained from contact with a protected tenant is also a tenant of the same dwelling as a protected tenant, the landlord shall change the locks of the protected tenant's dwelling not later than 24 hours after the protected tenant gives the landlord a copy of the court order. The landlord shall not be liable to the restrained person for any civil damages as a result of action the landlord takes to comply with this section. I'm not going to read anymore. It's just a glaring example of why conservatives don't trust the government and why Mark Twain was credited with saying no citizen's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session. The temerity to think that, well, you know, domestic violence is a bad thing, so I'm going to jump right into the landlord-tenant relationship, and I'm going to make things come out right. And I don't care about the landlord. I'm going to involve him. I don't care about the landlord. I'm going to involve them in this domestic relations dispute. So, you know, with the legislation like this for Mary Torres, we don't even need any Democrats in the legislature. We got Mary Torres. All right. Next, we go on to Judge Sukola and double pay. Well, sorry, folks, but Judge Sukola ruled against, what was his name? Steve Topaznia. Yeah, she did. And I'm going to tell you that I called it. You remember that quite some time ago. I called it. And again, this was a petition for writ of mandate. And a writ of mandate is hard to come by. You have to thread. Let me come back to Sukola versus double pay right after that big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
All three 3 arrested. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. The 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged yesterday as accomplices in the death of George Floyd have all been taken into custody. The other ex-officer now faces second-degree murder charges, yet protests continue as people say more needs to be done to change the country.
From coast to coast, Washington to Los Angeles, peaceful protesters making their voices heard. The violent clashes of the weekend and Monday largely giving way over the last 48 hours to loud, passionate but calm marches as police, National Guard and the thousands of protesters in so many cities seem to find a way to coexist, albeit in tense fashion at times.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt. 3 New York police officers injured after the curfew. 2 were shot. 1 was stabbed during a confrontation with a knife-wielding man. But it's unclear if this is related to protest. The officers are expected to be okay. The suspect, shot by police, also hospitalized but under arrest. A different scene in L.A. where the Dodgers and people around the city shined their lights into the sky at 9 p.m. last night for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to honor the memory of George Floyd. The idea is to symbolize a light in the darkness. And authorities are looking into the shipment of bricks, possibly meant for use as weapons during protests.
The intelligence centers around the pre-staging of bricks and rocks for later use. In some cases, police have found those caches before they could be used. Other times, they have not. Rocks, bricks, and frozen water bottles hurt nearly 100 Park Police and Secret Service officers during the weekend protests.
Fox's Leland Vittert. America's listening to Fox News.
Mezcla, Chamorro Fusion, Bistro in Hagåtña and Tumon are now open for takeout and free delivery services in selected locations. For more information, call 479-2652 or 3 or 969-2652. Open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Mezcla, Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comforts of your own home. They take your favorite local dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
Horizon Properties can empathize with individual property owners during this trying time. The last thing you should worry about is collecting rent or sending a repairman to your property. With their web-hosted property management system, Horizon can reach out to tenants, vendors, and owners alike and maintain the current prohibition requirements. Let Horizon Properties take care of it all. Help flatten the curve by remaining safe at home. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792 or visit horizonpropertiesguam.com. Horizon Properties, always there for you.
Pro-democracy lawmakers in Hong Kong stage a protest in the Legislative Council during today's debate over a national anthem bill, which would require all individuals and organizations to respect and dignify the anthem. Violators would face up to 3 years in jail. Philadelphia takes down a controversial statue of a former mayor.
The city had already scheduled the Rizzo statue removal for 2021 as it was often vandalized and represented for many a history of bigotry and oppression. But after protests and riots racked Philadelphia following the death of George Floyd, crowds tried to light it on fire and take it down by force this weekend. The current mayor, Jim Kenney, demanded it be taken down immediately. Rizzo, a police commissioner and mayor in the 60s and 70s, was known for aggressively policing black and gay communities, opposing desegregation of public schools, and telling people to, quote, vote white.
Fox's Jackie Heinrich. The real estate market in New York City is essentially in hibernation because of the pandemic, and that is driving prices way down.
The fear is prices are being driven into the ground, and some speculate the market may never fully recover. But broker Inta Radetsky of Our New York Real Estate is more optimistic.
It's like after 9/11 or after Lehman Brothers in 2009, things came back. After 9/11, people were saying you're crazy to live in financial district or Battery Park. Things will come back.
She says commercial real estate recovery might lag behind residential because of businesses that might not reopen. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
And a 5.5 magnitude earthquake jolted the California desert Wednesday evening. It was centered just north of Ridgecrest and was felt in Las Vegas. In New York, I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
As we emerge from the effects of the global pandemic, Security Title is rethinking how to best serve our customers. With our houses clean and closets reorganized, here's a reminder to take a look at the title to your house and other real estate. Is your trust in order? Is it time to update your wills? Do you have the best interest rate available on your home? As we get back to work, there's no better time to revisit your most valuable asset, your property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Half a day. This is Michelle from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated teams in Guam and on the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years. Oh, beautiful halftime show, sir. Beautiful halftime show. Here we go. Oh, it was beautiful, sir. The cannons.
Is it over?
The guns, yes, sir.
Wow, I missed it?
You look one way, you look the other way, it's over.
I had to go to, I was in the head when it was.
Oh, that's right, the head, sir.
Yeah.
Well done, sir.
All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that big halftime show that we have every day here on Tall Tales. I'm really sorry that I missed it. I will watch it when I get home tonight. I'll go back to Facebook and watch it again. Yeah. Okay, so we're talking about Judge Sokola versus double pay. And I have the decision here. The key part of the decision is on page 7. Rule 8.406 CT2 only applies to Topaznia if the Guam Police Department is closed and there are other employees on excused leave status. Now, of course, this is not the first time you've heard that. I've explained Rule 8 so many times, including Ed Byrne, the Director of Administration's interpretation as to why the general government is not paying double pay. So Judge Sokola says, having determined that the relief sought by Topaznia would constitute a ministerial act and that ministerial relief is appropriate to compel compliance with the administrative rule, the court now turns to the question of whether double pay or compensatory leave credits are required in the present circumstance. Rule 8.406A states that, quote, excused absence with pay and without charge to leave shall be granted to employees when natural disasters or other emergency conditions create unsafe working conditions. Section B goes on to clarify that excused absence may be granted only when there has been an official proclamation, etc. However, recognizing that some government employees are essential and need to report during emergencies, Section C creates an exception to the general rule of Section A. Section C1 states that except for those employees determined by the appointing agency to be necessary for providing essential services, employees shall be released from duty with pay without charge to leave for the period the facility is closed. The chief of police has determined that topaznia is necessary for providing essential services, so Section C1 does not apply to him. Topaznia's request for double pay is made pursuant to Section C2, which states the following: those employees required to remain on duty to provide essential services shall be paid at double the regular rate, etc., for the hours worked during the period the facility is closed, and the other employees are on excused absence. Rule 8.406C2 therefore only authorizes double pay during the period of time the facility is closed, and while the other employees are on excused leave. The question before the court is whether these two criteria have been met. 1. Topaznia has failed to demonstrate that the Guam Police Department is closed. Executive Order 2020-4 closed all non-essential government offices and suspended such services. Some agencies are completely, 3 days later, Executive Order 2020-5 announced that the government of Guam is operating in a limited capacity. Some agencies are completely closed. Several agencies are operational but closed to public access. Other agencies remain fully operational. On May 14, the Attorney General issued an opinion memorandum regarding the applicability of Rule 8.406. The opinion states the following as whether an agency is closed. And I won't go into that again. I've read it so many times. While identifying, the Attorney General opinion recognizes it as easy to categorize which agencies are completely open or completely closed, but much more difficult to determine the applicability of an agency such as the police department, which is partly owned. While identifying that this question is open for interpretation, the Attorney General declined to offer its own interpretation, instead stating that the Attorney General's office is not in a position to categorize executive branch agencies for the purpose of applying Rule 8.406. Then we go on. The factual record before the court is insufficient for the court to determine whether the Guam Police Department is closed. The factual record before the court. In a petition for writ of mandate, you have a verified petition. That creates the factual record. You could have declarations and affidavits, but there's nothing in the factual record for the court to determine that the police department is closed. Topaznia submitted a declaration in which he asserts the following, quote, as a result of the stay-at-home measures, sections, divisions, and such services as the police department was and continue to remain closed to the public. This sentence is the only fact in the record which provides any insight as to whether the Guam Police Department is closed. Topaznia has the burden of showing that a writ should issue. Topaznia has failed to allege the facts necessary to demonstrate that Rule 8.406 is applicable to him. Topaznia has failed to allege the facts. In other words, he hasn't said the right things. and the petition therefore fails. 2. Topaznia has failed to allege that other employees are on excused leave. Not only has Topaznia failed to demonstrate that the Guam Police Department is closed, but he has also failed to allege and demonstrate that other employees are on excused leave. Under Rule 8.406C2, Topaznia is only eligible for double pay or compensatory leave while other employees are on excused leave. And boy, I've talked about that so many times and pointed to the executive order that the governor signed on March 17, where she said nobody's on excused leave. And this is the reason that Ed Byrne, the director of administration, is saying we don't have to pay double pay under Rule 8 because nobody's on excused leave. And here, Judge Sikola is saying the same thing. Topaznia is only eligible for double pay for hours he works while, quote, other employees are on excused leave. Rule 8406 provides no clarification as to whether the phrase, quote, the other employees refers to all employees of a particular agency or only employees with the same job title. However, Topaznia does not allege that any Guam Police Department employees are on excused leave. In fact, this lawsuit has been filed on behalf of Topaznia and, quote, similarly situated individuals, suggesting that Topaznia and his colleagues are all working despite the executive order. Rule 8.406 is intended to provide additional compensation to essential workers who are forced to work during a period when similarly situated workers are on excused leave status. There it is. I've been saying this over and over again. Just notice what Judge Topaznia didn't say. I didn't see the word frontline workers. I didn't see the word danger or any of the rhetoric that the senators and the GFT and all the, they made this sacrifice. They were frontline workers. Well, I said from the very beginning, this is somebody's screwed up sense of fairness. And the sense of fairness is, well, these people got to stay home and got paid, so the ones who actually work should get paid double pay. And that's exactly what this opinion is saying. If you can't show that there were people in the police department on excused leave, you don't get the double pay. I'll read it again. Rule 8.406 is intended to provide additional compensation to essential employees who are forced to work during a period when similarly situated workers are in excused leave status, thereby rectifying any disparate treatment among employees. And what is the disparate treatment? Some people get paid for not working. Some have to work. And if I said it once, I said it 100 times. That's no way to construct a pay policy. And that's what Rule 8.406 does. Topaznia has the burden of showing that a writ should issue, yet he has failed to even allege that he is working while other Guam Police Department employees are on paid leave. For this reason, Topaznia's petition fails. Now, this would be required reading for the gang over GFT, who claim they've got 600 people ready to go, ready to file suit. Interesting. If you're going to go for a writ of mandate, you have a really heavy burden. The procedural requirements are tough. And if you're not going to go for a writ of mandate, then the litigation can be quite time-consuming. And if I get to it today, I'm going to show you that there's a pretty strong case of cold feet over at the legislature. That anxiousness that Tina Rose, Munya Barnes, the speaker, showed on the 20th of May seems to have cooled considerably. Okay, well, let's go to the. You ever been to New Orleans, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir. It's the French Quarter.
Yeah, that's where we're going now. We're going to the Vieux-Carre.
Hello?
Yes, sir, Frenchie.
Oh, okay. So we are on in New Orleans, like they say back there. Huh?
Yeah, a streetcar named Desire will take you anywhere you want to go in the French Quarter, right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Well, anyhow, I was looking at so many things. It's kind of hard just to make sense of everything because there are so much news and everything. It makes you see double, right?
Double pay.
Double pay, yeah. One of the things that is jumping at you after a little while is the hypocrisy of the left, which is nothing new. But in regard to the Wuhan virus versus the demonstration, 2 weeks ago, you had everyone and their cousin doing virtue signaling regarding the fact that you had to stay at home and wear your mask when you go on and everything. And then last week you could see people shoulder to shoulder, not keeping physical distance, not wearing masks, and having a good time rioting and burning things down. So, and what's amazing is that the same people that were virtue signaling us on the Wuhan virus, we're making excuses for all those people, So another hypocrisy, a new one, but it's a good one. And one thing that is also becoming more and more apparent is what I would say the anti-rule of law movement. In 2018, we saw that many of the groups that are financed by George Soros and his son were financing campaigns for new attorney generals and local DAs with the idea that they wanted to elect very left-wing DAs and attorney generals in the states, in order to change the way we approach the enforcement of the law. And definitely now you see the effect of those policies. Now here we elected Levin Camacho, and basically he's a do-nothing DA. He's always pushing down the ball down the corridor and not enforcing anything. Then you had people like the mayor of New York City, would change all the rules on bail bond, which basically allowed criminals to be released before the cops were even finishing with their paperwork. And yesterday was a perfect example of that. Last night, they arrested 900 people in New York, and they were all released without being charged. And so you have, this thing is not new. I mean, this is what has happened in Europe for the last 20 years, to the point that now in Europe, the police no longer wants to take the personal risk of enforcing the law unless the government is telling them to go ahead and break heads there. So it's very interesting. We ended up like Minnesota, the elected as an Attorney General, Keith Allison, which for a lot of people here don't know him, he's young and articulate. He's a smart guy, but he's a former communist, and he's also a former member of Nation of Islam, who is a segregationist black group with very dangerous people in their ranks. And, so if you had this to the fact that during Wuhan virus, a lot of those cities and liberal states released a lot of prisoners under the guise that they wanted to stamp out the spread of the virus. You have now out on the street a bunch of bad dudes that are very dangerous, and I'm sure I've been taking opportunities on that. And this is not new. We saw it even at the beginning of the French Revolution. The revolutionaries didn't have enough people, so what did they do? They emptied the prison, gave them money, and helped them spread terrors through the city of Paris, And so this is another thing that's very disturbing. And finally, you have the far left in the riots and organized crime. Now, we saw yesterday in New York something very interesting. You had a bunch of people that were coming with tools and everything to break into stores, some of them in expensive sports car. And apparently the police commissioner was saying they are organized crime members that take advantage of the riots in order to break in and get luxury items for cheap. It's very interesting. Now, you're old enough to remember the KKK in the South, the Jim Crow laws. And in those days, the Dixiecrats were using the KKK to terrify people and browbeat the opposition. Now, in the North, you have similar things where the Democrats are using Black Lives Matter, the Antifa, and all the other leftist groups that are out there, and there are a lot of them, to browbeat people and to spread terror. And so when you hear the president wants to put Antifa as a terror group, he's not that far off. To me, they are more like a modern version of the KKK. They are masked. Instead of wearing white hoods, they're wearing black hoodies. But their tactics, their ideology is very similar. They are very dangerous people. So we have now we have you mentioned it earlier today. This Black Lives Matter that have arrived on Guam, and it's 2 or 3 UOG social studies students that have taken the opportunity to use Black Lives Matter, but very few people that go through those things understand who Black Lives Matter are and what their policies are and what they think. And I think I want to revisit that maybe tomorrow before the demonstrations go on. But if I want to use my crystal ball, I would say tomorrow we're probably going to see the likes of Bevacqua, Marsh, Taitano, Perez, and all those people, maybe even Underwood joining them not far from the legislature at the demonstration to basically and have all the press there for the evening news to make a story and say, look at that, Guam and the brown people of Guam are aligning themselves with Black Lives Matter against injustice. And that's what I see in my crystal ball for tomorrow on this. And I think a lot of people here are a little naive about who those people are and how dangerous they are.
There's a phrase that is attributed to Vladimir Lenin, useful
Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov.
Yeah, and the phrase attributed to him is useful idiots.
Yeah, useful idiots is exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're well-meaning people. We all know the way to hell is paved with a lot of well-meaning people. And so we have very interesting things here. We think we're so far away, we're protected from those kind of nonsense thing, but we forget that we have a whole slew of people that are working either for the government or for the UOG that have very cushy jobs, working 15 hours a week and making $75,000 a year, and that are teaching hate. Those people are very dangerous. They're teaching hate. They're teaching segregation. With a new twist, it's based on the fact that they are victims, so they have to segregate from white folks and others. So you have that whole culture of victimhood, and of course, if you have victims, you have oppressors, right?
Correct.
And this is now ingrained in the mind of a lot of our very young minds that are very impressionable, both in high school and at UOG. And it's very disturbing. I don't think parents understand the extent of the damage that is being done to those young minds, because they are being taught hatred. And you've seen how some of those chamorros were very racist when they react to problems with the FSM community, for example, or with some of the Navy guys that are on island from time to time. And it's a very slippery slope. You don't need much to go from bad to ugly. And you know, we've seen it. You just need a bad political leader like you had in Minneapolis. You know, the same drunk on power leader that want to send SWAT teams inside churches because people are holding services, and then at the same time is telling his cops to stand down when they are real rioters, you know. So it doesn't take much, but this is a very dangerous trend. You know, this is not really original, because this has been happening in Europe for the last 20 years. It's slowly picking its ugly head in the U.S., starting under Obama, you know, with BLM, with a lot of fake stories, which I want to revisit tomorrow. You know, it's like Black Lives Matter. It's actually Black Lies Matter, because a lot of the things they are propagating are lies, and it's based on fake statistic. But a lot of people feel it's right, and therefore, you know, I don't know if you saw yesterday, there were several hundred idiots, upper middle class white people, basically making apologies for being white. You know,
true enough.
somewhere in D.C. or somewhere.
Yeah.
And you know, it's mind-boggling. You know, those people are really useful idiots. I mean, you don't even have to scratch; they come in droves.
Good enough. Well, thanks again, Frenchie. You shed a lot of light on that area. We'll be looking forward to your call tomorrow, okay?
Yeah. I think tomorrow we should watch these two demonstrations carefully. I think it will be after your show, most of them. But we can talk about it also on Monday and see how that progresses or does not progress. Thank you very much.
Okay, Frenchie, good talking to you. So I've got to take a short break. I got the 7th inning stretch coming up, and when I'm out there in the center field bleachers, I'm going to be looking for another Joe.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Cocoa Coffee Company mugs are now here. Show pride for your island as you enjoy your delicious Circle K coffee. Each generously sized 16-ounce mug is etched with Guam-inspired images like Chief Gadao, Serena, Two Lovers, and many more. The Cocoa Coffee Company mug collection is available for a limited time only, so don't miss out. Get yours today and collect them all. Exclusively available at Circle K locations. A portion of the proceeds go toward the Cocoa Bird Recovery Program.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Call 646-7616 or 777-7792. You can also visit them at horizonpropertiesguam.com.
more, seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago. And who is this I see wandering around out here in the center field bleachers? Oh, shucks, I hung up on him.
No, hello.
Yeah, okay, there you are, another Joe.
Uncle Bob, so it would seem as though Governor Lujan Guerrero might be a little bit more careful about, I think you were saying before that some of this was started by the governor's promises or something she said regarding the frontliners and their pay and what have you. I forgot what it was you were saying about it. And if that were the case, could it be that she might be a little bit more careful in the future of the things she says, especially regarding frontliners and the Wuhan Corona COVID-19 or whichever number virus it is now?
Well, it's not what she said. The real Joe Cruz would tell you it was real Joe Cruz. It's not what she said.
Oh, it's what she didn't say.
Yeah. She decided on March 17 that she was not going to pay the double pay. And conventional wisdom and government of Guam lore held that pursuant to 8.406, everybody who worked was going to get double pay. So everybody was banking on the double pay. And in my sarcastic way, I said a lot of them had probably already spent the money, you know. And then just a couple of weeks ago, they find out that she has not going to pay, she is not going to interpret 8.406 to pay the double pay. But she hid the ball all that long time. And my point was that on March 17, if she had said, I have interpreted 8.406 so that people don't get double pay, there would have been a lot of grumbling, et cetera, but not anywhere near as bad as now. That was the point that I made, another Joe.
Was it the legislature or just by chance or word of mouth? You came, just like anyone in particular? Did anyone in particular lead the charge in with regards to 8 point whichever reference you made there to the what was it, Guam annotated?
Well, Byrne is the one who finally explained the governor's interpretation, but we went for a long time with people in the government. Talina Nelson wrote a letter to the governor saying, hey, Rule 8.406 says you're supposed to be paying the frontliners double pay, and you're not doing it. Can you start doing that now? And
was that back in March?
That was later than that even. And I know for sure that the governor never answered Senator Nelson's letter. And then not long after that, the governor came out with her sliding scale three-step program, never saying anything at all about the double pay. And the double pay secret was kept until her acting chief of staff told the folks over at KOAM, no, we're not going to pay the double pay. And that's when the tripping contest started at the legislature, where 8 senators drafted up bills and were tripping over one another to provide the double pay that the governor was not going to pay under Rule 8.406.
Wow. Yep, it's a good thing that you caught that one there, Uncle Bob, and yeah, the governor probably should have answered that one as soon as the senator wrote her the letter. One more question, Uncle Bob, before I let others chime in.
Yeah.
Did Jack Haddock become one of the newer directors of some department or organization or agency on government of Guam?
Jack Haddock is the director of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission.
That's just new, just recently, of course.
Well, right after the inauguration, he was appointed.
Oh,
it must have been.
Right.
It must have been his service on the Tall Tales baseball team that got it. If you remember that.
Okay, thanks for your time, Uncle Bob. Appreciate it.
Okay, another Joe. So, Tom Fisher's suit on behalf of Steve Topaznia failed. And this perhaps could be something of a wake-up call for the GFT, who has been doing a lot of saber rattling about how we're going to sue, we're going to sue. The legislature at one time, 8 senators introduced or co-sponsored bills to do the double pay. Tina called the legislature into an emergency session on the 21st of May because this was a real emergency. And she certified that the bills didn't need public hearings because there was a danger to the public health or safety. But it appears that the ardor has cooled. I have an article that ran in the Post at the end of May that kind of sheds a different light on that. And it goes through, it summarizes the different approaches, talks how much money we're talking about here. Probably around $18 million to pay this double pay. And some interesting language in here. Maybe I can't find it after all. According to its fiscal note, the cost to GovGuam would be $18 million just for the executive branch if the current emergency ends on June 4. Guess what? Today is June 4. The fiscal note calls on the legislature to be aware of the concerns of government entities outside the governor's authority and the restrictions placed on response funds under FEMA, including that they occur on a reimbursable basis, meaning local funds need to first be expended. Without a direct appropriation to cover additional payroll costs, Bill 361 may compel the governor to begin the furlough process. The last pay measure on Friday's calendar is Bill 359, etc. Yeah, I think I read this the other day, and yeah, unfortunately, it's not the article that I'm looking for. Oh, here's the article I was looking for. Yeah. On Monday, Bureau of Budget and Management Director Lester Carlson said the application of CARES Act funding continues to be updated, but he only sees hazard pay as eligible. The government is already using CARES Act funding for hazard pay in the form of differential pay implemented through executive order, which, by the way, is illegal, but that's the governor's sliding scale. So, you know, this one of the bills says, well, you can pay this with CARES Act funding. And according to the director of BBMR, you can't pay it with CARES Act funding because it's only available for hazard pay, not for bonuses. So we talked about that before. Senator Mary Torres, speaking during the public hearing on Bill 361 last week, urged colleagues to look further into why other jurisdictions did not apply double pay. And if she had asked me, I probably could have provided my usual sarcastic answer. They're not paying double pay because they're not as dumb as we are. You know, they wouldn't see the logic in a system that's based on people getting paid for not working. That would be too hard for them. Torres asked whether St. Augustine was aware of any other jurisdiction that paid double pay, to which he said double pay appears to be unique to Guam. And then, quote, that's the point. Perhaps there's a reason other jurisdictions don't pay double pay, but actually have a tiered type of hazardous pay or differential pay for good reason. I just want to leave that thought with everybody. If you were to establish what is sound policy going forward in any situation, not knowing what your economic situation is or your ability to make good on such a statute, that should give you a lot of caution to pause. Tora said, well, it's pretty hard on her at the beginning of the program, but she got this one exactly right. Any bill that wants to deal with a situation of employees and pay during the Wuhan virus epidemic ought to start by saying Rule 8.406 is void forever. And any senator who or any director of administration who attempts to reinstate it will be recalled forthwith. Going on, this is what I was talking about, some cold feet popping up at the legislature. San Augustine agreed with Torres and said double pay maybe should never have been a rule. Whoa. But added that he sponsored Bill 361 to be consistent with an attorney general's opinion on double pay, which pointed to deficiencies in its application. So you got something that should have never been a rule in the first place, but because you don't like the way it's applied, you're going to introduce a bill that does the same thing. Very sensible, Joe. And then St. Augustine goes on, or attributed this. With regard to furloughs, St. Augustine said everything else should be cut before furloughs take place. And with regard to CARES Act funding, that money should first be applied to the populace before GovGuam. So St. Augustine is really playing against type here. He's saying that, maybe that rule was wrong to start with. And even if we can use CARES Act money, we shouldn't. Because that money should be applied to the population before applying it to the government of Guam. So where we had this stampede in May, led by Tina Rose Runya Barnes, finding, calling emergency sessions and everything, you probably see senators over there wearing woolen socks right now because their feet are cold. They've got cold feet. Maybe this isn't such a good idea after all. St. Augustine, this is unique to Guam. Nobody else is doing it. Mary Torres, there must be a reason that nobody else is doing it. St. Augustine, maybe that rule should have never been there in the first place. So finally, there's a thought process going on over at the legislature other than the old conventional, this is a good chance to pander to government employees. Let's make the most of it. So I think to sum this up here, what we've got is a situation where, and by the way, this is the double pay bills, notwithstanding their emergent content, apparently are not on the agenda for this session of the legislature. So here's what we know from the things the senators or government officials have said. One, you can't use CARES Act money to pay for it. Two, no other place in the country does it. Three, at least one senator, the finance and tax guy, says maybe we should never had that rule in the first place. Four, Mary Torres says we ought to take a long, hard look at this and fix it going forward. If we're going to talk about hazard pay, maybe we need a scaled hazard pay. And we ought to do it, keeping in mind that we don't have unlimited resources. So you guys out there that have already spent the double pay, maybe you need to think in terms of economizing a little bit, because maybe it isn't the sure thing that you thought it was just a few weeks ago when everybody, everybody couldn't say enough about frontline workers and their sacrifice and the danger, all of these other things, right? So we'll watch that one like a hawk. Right now, I think it's time to take a short trip to Churchill Downs.
Ingawa ko business rapo dari suksesan, iyo sukusiker COVID-19 esewowes. Esewos sefiari semua coronavirus, ira pada sibo sabuera ria warau fitne virats, seria kyo esap tsaatsan niwats. Sibo sabuera ria seves pori live pot, water kisi peuts. May fakkureutsia at sibo rosits ngirik kyo sidesin ikapesepes serimun. Sibo feriwisats arabi kisirat seiran semua coronavirus. Klitzkie kirei porraus kakeri yriget Esiresin avitto seriatsu office Micronesian Resource Center eko radio station not choice broadcasting mewa U.S. Department of Interior Office of Insular Affairs.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. Here we go. We got about 9 more minutes of Tall Tales, and we're done for another day. Unfortunately, today's Thursday. We only got one more day this week, and then the real Joe Cruz and I go into an involuntary hibernation, suffering all kinds of withdrawal pains because we won't be able to do Tall Tales. But let's make the most of what we got right now. Next item on the card is the Chamorro Land Trust Commission versus Jack. No, this is not drive-through Jack. This is Jack Haddock III.
Oh, yeah, the third baseman.
Yeah. You remember when he used to play for Tall Tales?
Yeah, the Tall Tales Tigers.
Yeah, boy, every 7th inning stretch, he was out there hitting the long ball, scooping grounders out of the dirt, firing the ball to first base, making diving shoestring catches in center field. He was probably the best player that Tall Tales ever had. And then he got drafted by the Lou Leon Guerrero administration, and that was the end of his baseball career.
The Cubs picked him up.
Yeah. So here's what this article that ran in the PDN says. CLTC leases remain stalled by lack of new rules. Well, that's probably got to be good news. If they're not letting out any leases, that means they're not giving them to insiders, or there's no cronyism or corruption if they're not doing it at all. It's been more than a year since the Chamorro Land Trust Commission instructed land trust staff to create new standard operating procedures so it could resume issuing residential and agricultural leases. More than 4,700 people who applied for the land trust in December 1995, when the waiting list opened, still haven't been awarded a lease. The operating procedures, which were due to the Commission in July 2019, weren't delivered until October 2019 and are still incomplete, according to commissioners who raised the issue during the May 2020 meeting. The Vigilance Committee, a local organization that advocates transparency in government, this week asked Land Trust Administrative Director Jack Haddock, to provide copies of all communications between Haddock and the Commission relating to the operating procedures. Haddock must respond this week, although he can ask for more time if there are a large number of documents. Land Trust staff also is months behind in preparing the Commission's board minutes for approval. They're not even doing their minutes. Now, you remember what a disaster the Land Trust Commission was. Giving away extremely expensive land leases to insiders. The director signing as the director and as the lessee. As the lessor. It's just, it was almost like a horror movie. It was so bad. But now they aren't even doing their minutes. The Land Trust stopped processing new residential and agricultural leases in May of 2018 after the Attorney General issued a legal opinion stating the Land Trust broke the law by allowing applicants to swap places on the waiting list and by allowing commission staff to approve lease agreements. The commission in May of 2019 voted to lift the self-imposed moratorium and resume issuing leases and instructed Haddock and the Land Trust staff to develop a simple standard, they say standard, or what they mean is standing operating procedure for issuing leases consistent with the law. The procedure should address common questions related to the application process, Commission Chairwoman Pika Farran said at the time, such as what to do if an applicant died and their name is announced to receive a lease. Farran said she would like the Land Trust to process groups of applicants at the same time instead of dealing with them individually. And leases in villages should be awarded through a lottery system instead of allowing applicants to choose. Applicants can request a preferred village, she said, but the location of their lease lot in that village should be determined by lottery. The commission canceled one of its meetings in June 2019 to give staff time to work on new leasing process, which was due in July of 2019. The commission asked for a progress report on June 6, 2019, with a full presentation on the new leasing process on June 20, 2019. The staff missed the July 2019 deadline to deliver the new leasing process. Farran, during the commission's September 2019 meeting, expressed frustration that the assignment hadn't been completed. Haddock apologized during that meeting, but didn't state when he will provide the operating procedures. Commissioners received draft operating procedures on October 14, 2019, but Farran last month said the staff didn't deliver what the commission had asked for, including the procedures for processing applicants in groups. The details of the leasing proposal are unknown because the Land Trust has refused to disclose the document because it's a draft. The agenda for the commission's May meeting included the proposed leasing of more than 100 lots in Nanarahan in the Iha subdivision, all of which have access to water, power and water. The issue wasn't entertained because the revised leasing procedures aren't ready. Well, there's so much wrong with the Chamorro Land Trust Commission that it's hard to know where to begin. One thing that happened was that Pika Farran and her swan song said that she didn't accomplish what she wanted to accomplish because these rules weren't finished. Well, I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. There's still a lot to talk about as far as the Chamorro Land Trust Commission is concerned. So here we are, Real Joe Cruz's favorite song. So we'll say goodnight for tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow at 1600. So long.